thanks for braving it all the way to the third floor of the MGM, so I hope you didn't have to come far. As a point of introduction, I'm Valerie Singer, and I'm the General Manager for Global Education here at Amazon Web Services. And I'm very happy to be here to talk about our Tech Alliances and Skills to Jobs, which is a team that is housed under Global Education at AWS. As you might have heard in press announcements, and we just had a blog that was released today, we've been working on this new initiative for quite a while to build new talent pipelines and to address the growing skills gap. Our team focuses most widely on early career talent and creating diverse pipelines of talent to help our employers continue to innovate and to work in digital skills and cloud more effectively. And we're doing this really for around the world, and we're working with about 78 institutions globally, which serve about 380,000 students. So again, this is a coalition, our Tech Alliance, of government, education, and our employer community. We also bring in business conveners. You'll hear from one today who's sitting next to me. And we work backwards from the skills needs of our employers, really to understand what their signaling is in their organization, inculcate that into curriculum in education, and bring government and convener bodies in to make sure that our early career learners have a pathway to good paying, high growth jobs. And so we're going to be discussing the Tech Alliance today. And then joining me on stage is Kirsten Barnett, who's the Executive Director of the New York Jobs CEO Council, Ignacio Aranda-Casals, who's joined us from Spain, and he is the Technology Executive Principal at NTT Data Europe and LATAM, and then Grant Milstead, the VP of Digital Technology, came with an entourage at United Airlines. So glad to have you all here today, and thank you all for joining us on the panel. So let's start with the current state of the global skills gap. And there are lots of statistics that we can share with you, but I will share a couple of them. And that's in the US, we see that the cloud growth of jobs will compound 15% year over year to 2031. And so that's an awful lot of jobs that need to be filled and that need to be filled early in order to ensure that our employer and employer community can still keep up with the pace of innovation. In Europe, 57% of all enterprise report that they have skills gaps and that these skills gaps are impeding their progress to be able to innovate and change within their organizations. Some other stats are if early career talent pipelines are continuing to funnel this level of talent into enterprises, we can actually change the GDP quite considerably. Early career talent by 2030 can impact the GDP by about $1.5 trillion. So this is a really big problem and also a really great opportunity for economic development. So there's great trend lines that we can talk about, but I do want to pass it on to our panel here. So let's start with Ignacio. You are working with our Spain Tech Alliance and across Europe. So talk a little bit, or tell us a little bit about how NTT, what challenges you're facing, and then how you're addressing them within your organization.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie. Yes, as you said, it's a huge challenge. In our case, NTT Data, we work professional services for a lot of customers, different sectors. And we basically apply technology to transform the business of our customers. And this is not possible if we have problems with the talent. So without talent, we cannot develop those transformations. And that's an issue for us because we cannot run our business as we expect. But also, it's a problem for our customers that cannot be as competitive as they could. And also, I would say it's a general society problem because if we do not solve that issue with the talent gap, we cannot evolve at the speed we could. So, I mean, it's a huge challenge. And that's why we are getting very creative and joining the Tech Alliance, it's one of the good initiatives we are doing to solve that gap.
So thank you for that. So Kirsten, on your side too, you're seeing this as a convener body of a lot of employers, the same types of challenges that Ignacio just talked about, but in the city of New York. Similar with the economic development aspirations that New York has to be a tech hub. Can you talk a little bit about how the Tech Alliance is positively impacting your council's members, and also how this is impacting New York?
Sure, yeah. So to zoom out just for a minute, New York is home to some of the world's largest employers and greatest employers, and they need to have access to the talent in their backyard that's skilled in order to thrive. At the same time, New York is also a place that has a lot of challenges. We have huge socioeconomic divides, opportunity gaps, and so we have this huge potential talent pool there that is not currently thriving. And so the creation of the council was really born out of those two truths. What happened was the CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, convened a group of CEOs, including Andy Jassy, and for a dinner in 2020 that talked about those two things. They're all large employers, either based there or have large presences there, and said how we're all in a war for talent, particularly highly specialized technical roles. And we're also want to hire more local talent than we're able to. So how can we, as private sector leaders, beyond philanthropy, do something that's market-driven that really benefits both job seekers and employers and makes the city stronger? And so that's what we are focused on, is taking a city that I classify as program-rich but system-poor, and building a system that works for New Yorkers and works for employers. And what we love about the Tech Alliance is I don't think of it as a program. I think of it as something that's in a system. You're actually building in the curriculum into, we do a lot of work with the City University of New York. You're building this into the curriculum that students are receiving to make sure what they're learning in the classroom is exactly what employers are going to be valuing. And that bridging of employers and education, there's just no other way to do it in a way that's driving systems change than to have those two more closely aligned than they have been in the past.
Thank you for that. And so the city of Chicago, which is the home to United Airlines and 88,000 employees, this is now an urgent need for your organization as well.
It is.
And so when we talk about entry-level talent and coming into an organization, we also see that when we bring in talent and we give them the supportive structure that they need, there's less attrition, there's lower turnover, there's a higher diversity ratio in your organization, and innovation and agility becomes much higher. So can you talk a little bit about United's journey and how you adopted a cloud-first approach, and then how that then kind of lent itself to entry-level talent and a Tech Alliance?
Yeah, absolutely, Val. On the whole, this is everyone's problem. We're all in it together. I think you made the point that there's just not enough candidates at an entry-level skill set, both in kind of traditional career paths and non-traditional career paths. And so for United, we serve 460 communities around the globe. And we took a look at those communities and just said, hey, how do we get more talent in our organization that is as diverse as the customer base that we represent? And so we started looking at alternate paths. And so at United, we created a program that we call Innovate. And Innovate is a combination of apprenticeships, internships, and kind of your 4-year traditional entry-level candidates all coming together into one program. And that pathway has really been incredible for us. On the apprenticeship side, we started with just 12 apprentices. We're up to about 50 apprentices in our program, and we plan to grow it about threefold between now and 2025. And we've already converted 12 of those apprentices to full-time employees. So we're so excited. A program that we didn't have 3 years ago is now creating new early career pathways to our organization. And it's been an incredible learning opportunity both for the apprentices joining United, but then also for our employees who get the great experience of growing talent within the organization, seeing somebody grow through an apprenticeship, and then seeing them get hired at United. So it's early days, but we're so excited about that.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question. I've got so many questions on this too, as you know, but the follow-up question is really around the ancillary effects or the knock-on effects of bringing in early career talent in an apprenticeship program. You and I had this conversation about the benefits to the existing organization. So can you talk a little bit about how that helps the growth and development of current employees?
Yeah, 100%. First of all, when apprentices come into the organization, it was new for United. And so we asked ourselves, what skills are these apprentices going to have? What do we need to grow in terms of learning and skill set through the organization? And I think first and foremost, we've been really, really impressed with the capabilities of apprentices and how they've grown in the organization. And in terms of internal benefits, one of the things that we're seeing is it's a great opportunity for high potential employees that are not yet leaders, they're not yet managers, to be able to be a coach and an assignment leader of an apprentice. And as that apprentice is growing in their skills and adopting technical skills, we're seeing some of our high potential technical leaders grow in their leadership skills and their communication skills and their feedback skills. And that's been an incredible kind of knock-on effect from the organization. It's also been incredible in terms of our retention. You know, employees that are part of this program, they're passionate about it. It tends to be kind of a grassroots program where employees that have passion want to be assignment leaders, and it makes them feel like they have, you know, really a place in the organization and a place in the mission of United. And we're just so excited about that growth and the leaders that are coming out of that program, both in terms of the apprentices, but then also some of the young leaders that are growing to be managers through that experience as well.
I love that. One of the questions we get a lot in the Tech Alliance is not just about bridging the skills gap or training early learners on skills that they can then take into the organizations they're going to be serving, but how do we help our early career talent develop the soft skills, or we call them durable skills, that they need to be successful. And NTT has had great success in onboarding new career talent and bringing them into the organization so that they have the cultural underpinnings to be successful. So Ignacy, tell us a little bit about what NTT is doing there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the situations we were facing was that we have all the entry levels employees joining the company. We had to spend a lot of effort in onboarding them within the company to make them ready for a productive, to work with a real customer. And in those programs, during the onboarding, we're doing basically technical stack trainings, but also soft skills methodology and so on. And that's because what we were seeing is that when they finish the formal education, they still have a huge gap to be really productive. And that's not, as I was saying, not only on the technology stack, because we'll be talking later, but technology is evolving so fast that it's almost impossible to catch up, so you need to continuously be learning. But especially on the way we work with our customers, having team building, working as a team, working together, how we help each other. So that kind of training, that's something that we had to do in the past. Now with the Tech Alliance, we are starting that process before. So it means we are not doing this during our onboarding process, but we start that onboarding process during the education of the official part. So that part we gain some time, and obviously we save some money. And we see that the final result, when they finalize the official education, they are more ready for real world environment. So, I mean, that's very good experience in that case.
That's great best practices. Yeah. So we have reinforced learning and mentoring that helps develop future leaders. Yeah. Continuous learning on your side, and also ensuring that you're onboarding early career talent with the kinds of incubated support systems that they need in order to be successful. So thank you. And as we mentioned, the Tech Alliance it brings together a lot of bodies: education, government, the employer community, and our business conveners like New York Jobs CEO Council. But a huge part of this is how education and educational institutions can really help with developing the curriculum that's relevant to early career talent and that matches the skills that employers need. So Kirsten, I want to ask you a little bit about the unique relationship that New York Jobs CEO Council has with City University of New York, which we call CUNY, to support and connect students to industry, and how that pathway works. So what are some of the best practices that you're seeing in New York that this group can also maybe consider in their world?
So CUNY, the City University of New York, was our first partner and one of our strongest as we're building public-private partnerships. And just to share a little about CUNY for those who aren't familiar, it's 25 different public colleges, 8 of which are 2-year degree schools, all within the 5 boroughs of New York. It's 250,000 degree-seeking students, another 250 that are non. Half of CUNY students come from families that earn under $30,000 a year in New York City. And almost all of CUNY students, 85% or so, are people of color. So it's this rich pool of talent that is this target market for our companies. And as my other 2 fellow panelists just mentioned, our companies have been changing their hiring practices and rethinking how they make that door wider to talent. But just making it wider doesn't naturally fix the problem. You also then have to make sure that the talent has the skills that you need. And aligning business and education really the only way to do that. And so with partnerships like the Tech Alliance, CUNY's been an incredible partner because they can essentially help steer us with where are the schools that need help the most with their curriculum, where also does it align the most with our partners, our fellow companies, partners, and missions, which is why we started with some of the community colleges, and how can this connect with the hiring practices and changes that our employers are making internally so that this is just one long funnel. And I think, so far I think we have 1,200 or so students and enrolled in the curriculum that Amazon has helped shape. But there's, in the hundreds of thousands, there is opportunity to continue that, particularly as these tech skills become more and more important. And I'll just mention that in New York City right now, about half of jobs are looking for some sort of cloud component, and about 1 in 5 are specifically looking for AWS skills. So there is a huge incentive for both employers, but also these colleges. There's a commercial reason for them, too, to make sure that their curriculum is strong, market-driven, and really connected in the classroom to what employers are going to value in the workforce afterward.
Thank you for that. And so, Grant, you're also in Chicago. We have a similar construct with P33, IC Stars, and with city colleges. So tell us a little bit about, as you as an employer engage with those local bodies, both convener bodies as well as educational institutions, to bring in talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for us, maybe one of the first surprises we had is a lot of these organizations, they don't actually know what skills, corporations are looking for. And so some of the first kind of partnerships that we developed both with city colleges and then organizations like IC Stars and P33 was really doing a skills assessment and a skills map, and mapping some of the curriculum in each of those educational institutions and private institutions to the skills in our organization. And in many ways it was kind of a blank canvas and a great opportunity for us to start to mold and shape the skill sets that come out of those capabilities, and it flows right into the pipelines that we have at United. So that way, especially on the apprenticeship side, that apprentices are coming in with some base skills that are going to really be helpful and really aligned to the technology capabilities that we have. I think the other thing, though, that was a little bit of a surprise is, there's a misnomer around apprentices that they're going to focus on the help desk, or they're going to be racking servers or things like that. And with our focus on cloud, we've had apprentices in cloud working in AWS. And it's been an opportunity, as our organization has grown on that cloud journey, to also bring a career path for apprentices through that skill set of full stack development, cloud work, and DevOps. And so we've been able to expand the skills that we've had in the various tracks in the apprenticeship program through our partnership with those organizations, and then also through the experience of us moving to the cloud over the last couple of years.
That's fantastic to hear. So, it's all very good news, but there also are challenges, right? And so one of the challenge with the IC Stars, for instance, is that they produce 50 apprentices, and United takes them all. So, how can we create more for the community of learners as well as for the community of employers in Chicago? I mean, is there a scale mechanism that you're taking a look at there?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would say, 2 things. Within United, we have a motto that we call inclusion propels innovation. And the concept there is both inclusive practices of allowing employees to take risks, allowing employees to offer up ideas, allowing employees to really extend themselves beyond, their job responsibility, tends to take us to a place much higher than we would have planned. And so some of our scale, especially even in Innovate, has come from amazing ideas internally in the organization on different pathways, different partnerships, different organizations that employees were part of outside of United that they brought to us. But then on top of that, to your point, we're also stretching some of our partner organizations. Partners, maybe thought a class of 25 or 50 was sufficient because they weren't sure on the demand. The tech job market right now can be a little iffy in certain markets. And so when United goes and takes a full class of IC stars, it shows there's demand. And so we've been, again, we've got a goal of growing threefold. We're sharing those plans with the various pipelines that we're working with and really helping them plan out that demand. And Chicago, just like New York, is a huge market. There's a lot of corporations like United. And so the more that we band together and really, make this a part of our core capability, it's really a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario where all of these organizations start thinking bigger, start thinking at higher scale, and know that we can accept that scale as well.
Yeah.
Val, can I just jump on?
Sure.
To such a good point around the scaling to more and more employers. I mean, that's how you get to scale. And I think that's also one of the benefits of working with the community college system or with existing systems is that there are some other amazing apprenticeship programs out there and ones that we endorse but are very expensive for the employer. And so for large employers, that might be fine. But to really make it a system, you need to have a solution that's going to work for mid-sized employers and small employers that may not have that internal training capacity or the ability to pay for someone else to go out and recruit and train these apprentices. And so the community college system already being there and taking that and enhancing it and having it evolve to meet employer needs, I think really is your solution to having it work for all employers.
Yeah, I agree. And when we go outside the United States, the community college system is something that's fairly unique to the United States. But in places like Spain, there is an analog, and that would be the vocational technical system. And so, Ignacio, do you want to talk a little bit about how NTT is helping to bridge those tech gaps and take those learners in using that VOTEC system, which provides the basis for diversity and equity and inclusion in that base of learners?
Yeah, I would say, taking into account in all the countries where we operate, there are common challenges. So I would not say there's a specific things from in Spain. In Spain, we have some mechanisms, as you mentioned, that allow us to, start that process earlier. So we start merging all the education with employers so that we can start working together and then find that solution. And we are doing this in a, let's say, different way so that we can even engage more all the students. For instance, we created a jam session in the region, which is a kind of a hackathon, which basically make some education schools to compete among them with a technical challenge. And that's a different way of learning AWS technology while they enjoy. And we have also the chance to know all the students, to also see which are the ones which match more to our core values, so that we can see which are the future employers that could fit better to our company. So that's one example. We are doing other kind of programs, especially for women in tech or women in the cloud, to basically cover one of the gaps we see, and that's in Spain. But in general in all Europe, we see that we lack a lot of women talent in our teams, and that's something we want to invest in. And also would like also to mention, because you said diversity, right? Diversity, I mean, that's very important because what we see is that, we have diversity in our customers and our customers have diversity on their customers. So if we provide solutions which doesn't provide that ingredient of the diversity, it lacks the requirements our customers are expecting to us. So that's why participating in Restart program, for instance, with AWS, is helping us to bring that diversity with people with different backgrounds, not coming from technology, but now starting in technology with different experiences. That's helping a lot to make more diverse team, diverse solutions for our customers. So, that's how we see it in Spain as well. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And so for those of you who are not familiar with Restart, Restart is a free program offered by our training and certification teams under our education programs that offers cohorts of about 25 diverse learners at a time the opportunity to dive deeper into technology in a 12-week intensive kind of course that provides them the opportunity to then gain skills for jobs. So that's a great use case for that. So Kirsten, one of my favorite examples of how this has worked was a learner whom we met in April at the announcement of the New York Job CEO Council, CUNY, New York Mayor's Office, and AWS launch of the Tech Alliance, and it was about Hector Rodriguez. So Hector was working as a massage therapist, if I remember this correctly, and then reskilled at Queensborough Community College and was then hired at a financial services company as an analyst. And it showed this really great pathway of being able to reskill for a position that would provide him with a much higher job growth and opportunity going forward, which is also a great example of how really focusing on a diverse set of learners can move the needle. So can you talk a little bit about the commitment of New York Job CEO Council to work with the organizations, especially in education, to create that diversity and inclusion pathway for these learners?
Yeah, and I mean, Hector's a great example of a success story. Right now, I feel like we have a lot of proof points, but probably our biggest challenge as a council is that what's working is not what's worked in the past. And so it is unfamiliar both to employers, but also to job seekers. And sometimes I think we take for granted that if you build it, they will come. That is not always the case. You have to meet job seekers where they are and your talent pools where they are. They only know what they know. And so, I mean, for an example of what's working, our 30 companies over the past 2 years have hired 30,000 low-income New Yorkers into jobs that are family sustaining. So this year, I think that's $69,000, which is a great proof point. So things are working. At the same time, just last week, I was in a meeting around another partnership we have where we didn't get the number of students, not enough students to fill the seats, essentially, of the employers that had them open, and which is such a shame because you feel like each seat there is a life changed. How are they not all there? And what we hear anecdotally a lot from a student like that maybe got an internship at JP Morgan and then turned it down is they're afraid to leave their job at CVS. Almost all CUNY students are working part or full time in addition to school. And they think if I leave this job, CVS or Starbucks, to go do an apprenticeship program, an internship program, whatever it might be, in 3 months, what will I do? And so some of this is education to say, Amazon, Bloomberg, JP Morgan, they pay better in their internships than what you're making right now. So that gives you a little cushion when you get back to get that next job. But also, if you don't do this, it's going to be really hard to get those jobs. So these are the opportunities, and this is where you need to get in the funnel. And so educating students, but also families, we do a lot of that with high schoolers, advisors, faculty, these are the people, anyone that's influencing their decisions is incredibly important, especially when you're dealing with most CUNY students are first-gen college, often first-gen American, and so this, I often feel like I'm playing whack-a-mole for a job. You solve for one thing, right? We've built this great program, and then you have these great proof points like Hector, but then you also have these examples of where it's still not working even though it's built. So that is, our biggest challenge, but also our biggest opportunity to drive change.
And I think that's where government comes in too. So we've seen, and Kirsten, I'm gonna throw this back at you, we've seen a huge amount of activity with the New York Mayor's Office and their skilling groups to really make a commitment, but we've also seen it now with the governor, right, of New York, and she has now initiated a few really creative programs to make sure that learners have an opportunity to at least know that they can enter a system and gain an education. So you want to talk a little bit about that too, because I think that's important to know that it's not just employers on our side or these convener organizations, but governments really need to be involved in this as well.
It is. I think you really need a trifecta and at the right time, and it's not something that you can fabricate or make. We are lucky that right now the Jobs Council is 3 years old. And right now we have the Eric Adams administration in the mayor's office, which is an administration very focused on workforce development, very forward-thinking. He's made a commitment to 30,000 apprenticeships by 2030, and that includes trade that exists, but a big fueler pillar of that is going to be increasing professional apprenticeships. So what we're talking about today and making that mainstream, because again, there are proof points, but they're not mainstream yet. And you cannot do that. I really do feel like we are lucky, and the success we've had is because we had local government, we've had employers that are incredibly engaged and really committed to this at the highest level with their CEOs, and then we've had education that's been a really receptive partner as well in helping change the needle. So without that, I think it is really hard you can make progress, but you really can't change the system without all three of those players very aligned. And then it's also nice that while our local and state government aren't always aligned on everything, they are also quite aligned when it comes to workforce development and the importance of skilling talent, and particularly to keep employers in the state, in the city. So we feel lucky for that. There's more funding coming in to help supplement what our employers are already doing. But yeah, it is. It's never enough. You still always take more. So yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, so this year though, the governor's office initiated a program where the students throughout the state of New York are getting invitations to either City University of New York or State University to apply with a guaranteed position. And they had the opportunity to do that before, but they weren't solicited, right? So they might not have known. And so the on-ramps into education are becoming much more clear just by opening the mail, which I think is really important.
That's a great point. But back to what you only know what you know to look for. And particularly when you look at high school students, same thing. For the first time this year, CUNY sent every high school student a letter. Their advisor handed it to them, and then they also sent one home to the mail with families that said, congratulations, you're accepted to one of the CUNY schools. Now, that's always been the case. The community colleges cannot turn people away. So like you have to be able to do that. But the change in the application rates, they also said, we'll waive the application rates if you apply by October, trying to get students to do this early. Here's information on how to fill out your FAFSA form. I just dropped an earring. And so anyway, making sure that was right in front of them, it changed the whole perception, thank you, on particularly for families that weren't as familiar to say, oh wait, look, my child could go to college, and oh wait, it's also probably gonna be free. Things that, again, they've always been there, but you have to meet people where they are, or they don't know to look for it.
So back to you, Grant, about city colleges, the Pritzker Foundation, Governor Pritzker. So you've got, I feel like we're maybe not quite as ahead, but where can United and employers like United really compel governments to do the kind of work and think through some of these really urgent needs of getting new learners into the system so that we can then get them out and into jobs? So talk a little bit about how United is playing in that world.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for us, I'll highlight a couple things. One is, it's about opening the aperture. We've talked a lot about getting more and more opportunities for alternate pathways into these programs. And I think that's a huge role for government, both in terms of government-led higher education, but then also policy. The other thing I'd mention is, there's plenty of needs outside of apprentices and actually those entry-level workers for wraparound services in the organization and in organizations that support companies like United. And so the more that we've talked about, opportunities for training around coaching and mentorship, opportunities around really how you support those leaders, I think there's an opportunity to kind of give more organizations the right financial support to be able to provide those and be bigger leaders. With that, obviously, the more that we're hiring and looking for that capability, the more it'll grow, a bit organically as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. So there's also a really interesting world that kind of surrounds the extension, the expansion of AWS cloud services, and that is the world around the regions that we build. And so there are these wraparound opportunities for learners there too. So, for instance, our public policy team actually has a fusion splicing program that they sponsor with local community colleges to help to bring in more talent into the data centers. And we actually just launched a center in Aragon, in Spain, and it creates opportunities for people in region to upskill and to reskill. And so, from an NTT perspective, can you talk a little bit about the continuous learning and that cycle that your company goes through, especially when you have these, really big events that happen around you, like a region launch, which then extends the capacity for cloud around your organization?
Exactly. Well, I would say, I think you probably said it's not something you do one time. It is something that we need to continuously invest, especially in technology. In technology, we need to be continuously learning. Technology, as I said before, is evolving so fast. No one knew about the Gen AI 1 year back, and now everyone is a specialist, or says they are a specialist. So we need to be continuously learning. So that's something that needs to be part of the system. It's not something one time. And then if we have special triggers, like opening a region in Spain that was generating a lot of jobs in the country, and it's a great opportunity to accelerate the pace of that reskilling. As far as we have seen, especially in the region of Aragon, where we have a huge branch in there with almost 1,000 employees already, we have seen a lot of people reskilling from different kind of jobs, non-technical ones, to start working in technology. So that's, again, another excuse. So having a huge investment in a region pays back also in the reskilling part. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So Ignacy and I also were playing with the Gen AI tool before we came on stage, just to check out a couple of our stats, which were correct, by the way. We didn't believe them, and then we ran it through Perplexity, which is one of our partners, and it said, yes, 15% compounded annual growth on cloud jobs in the US. So this is true. So we are experts now too in
Exactly.
Gen AI, right? So anyway, if you haven't heard about Gen AI, we'll be happy to fill you in. So one other question too, I guess it's more of a comment, Kirsten, for us to think through is experiential learning. So we talked a little bit about bringing the skills needs to education. We've talked about the throughways for learners to jobs. We've talked about the soft skills that they need, apprenticeship programs. But many times learners are stuck in what you had talked about, working at CVS. I don't want to go work at JP Morgan because I'm worried this internship's not going to lead anywhere. But that experiential learning is so important. So, talk a little bit about some of the creative ways New York Jobs CEO Council is bringing that experiential learning to those learners so that they can have an entrance point and not feel like they're risking their incomes and
yes,
their time.
I mean, if you're going to work all through college, it would make sense to work at something that's aligned, marrying the practical with the theoretical of what you're learning in the workplace. If you look at countries like Switzerland with very successful apprenticeship programs across the board that are not purely vocational and are very mainstream, it is that, the students are going to school 2 days a week and they're working 3 days a week, but it's in the same vein. That also, when you think about why vocational apprenticeships in this country have been so successful, a lot of it is that reason. So this model of learn, practice makes so much more sense than just learn and then go try it in the workplace. It also helps students figure out learners figure out, is this the right pathway for me? Am I interested in this? You'd rather have them discover that they're scared of blood when they're a nursing student before they've gone, 2 years in. So I think that for some reason our system just hasn't supported that to date, but it is a huge priority of ours, both because our companies think it makes for better employees. You get employees that know they want to be there. They've already had some experience, but you also get employees that have had that on-the-job training, whether or not it's in their workplace or not. And so while that can happen in the workplace, and we do have apprenticeship programs starting in high school where they come to employers, Amazon is one of them, that also can happen remotely. So you can have virtual internships, and some of those can be far more scalable, or working on projects, marketplaces, if you will, where you're taking projects from different companies, doing it in the classroom, whether it's high school or college. Those are more scalable because it requires less on an employer's time. You can do the same project across, say, 20 high schools. And so I think you need a combination of both because this is not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's not one-size-fits-all for the talent and particularly not this talent, nor is it for the employers. And so, but it is an incredibly important thing to solve for making sure that you're having that practical and workplace-based learning. One other thing I will mention that we're doing, we have a faculty fellowship program for high school and college faculty every summer, where they come in and learn about how to embed experiential and practice-based teaching and learning in their classroom. It's been amazing to see the changes. At the end, they actually present on how they're going to be changing their curriculum. And this is without even saying, here's an apprenticeship to embed. I mean, this is what they're doing on their own. So again, the awareness there of we can't assume that faculty would know to do that or would think about what employers are looking for. That driving awareness is also a huge driver of the change that we're looking for.
It's a really good point about making sure that faculty and educators continue to educate themselves so that they can then build into their curriculum the most relevant skill sets, and that they're willing to do that, right? And so we happen to have some very willing participants on the CUNY side, City University of New York, which is really a gift to us, so that we can really help to extend those pathways to students really quickly. But for virtual internships, if that's of interest, there are several companies that do it. We are piloting right now with a company called Virtual Internships. There are also companies like Forage and Parker Dewey who do those virtual internships for community colleges and for employers around the world. So we've got about 85 students, I think, going through that program at CUNY right now, and we're very hopeful that that'll bridge that gap too between I can't quit my job, but I really would love to have the experience of an internship. So it's a really good point. So moving to you, Grant, just a little bit. I do want to talk a little bit about some of the work that you're doing just to make sure that your teams both continuously learn as well as create that diverse profile of learner. We've talked a lot about your apprenticeship program, about Innovate, which has been a really great program for you. But where do you go from here? Like, how do you make sure that this continues to scale and that your teams continue to grow with these programs so it's not just one and done?
Yeah, 100%. I want to hit on maybe one thing related to reskilling, and then I'll talk a little bit about where we go. One thing we've found with reskilling is, internally at United, we're a 100,000 person organization. And so in many ways, we don't even have to look externally when we talk about reskilling. And so that could be a technology professional that maybe has technology skills, but they're not modern day, and going through a program that we call Skill Builder to get them training, on-the-job experience, special projects. Or it could be an example that I love, which is we had a flight attendant who was flying for United and said, you know what, technology seems really interesting. I'm going to spend some time, take a boot camp, get in and immersed into it. And that flight attendant joined our Innovate program through the early career leadership development program. And not only is he thriving in the organization, he's one of the best people to go when we have user requirements and user stories around flight attendants. We go out and talk to flight attendants. He speaks the language coming from that skill within our organization. And so it's been an incredible pathway for us to be able to do that even before we look externally. In terms of diversity and kind of where we go from here, I'd say early signs that things are working. Innovate is far more diverse than our kind of traditional pathways. We're 78% people of color as part of the Innovate program. We're 43% women. Both of those metrics far exceed kind of what we see in the STEM, the STEM mix of diverse candidates. And so it's really showing us that those pathways are leading to great heights for us. And so, for us, I mentioned we're going to continue to grow kind of all aspects of the Innovate program and grow that across United. But, one of the things we talked about in preparation for today was also, as an organization, we're continuing to grow and adopt. We had to kind of change some of our traditional methods and traditional practices. So part of it, too, is rethinking our job descriptions, rethinking our job requirements, even rethinking our job levels to make sure that really successful candidates that come through programs like Innovate have a really clear career path, since most career paths previously had been kind of developed for more of that traditional path. So changing the structures within our organization is helping us to adopt and scale internally, and that's one of the big next steps for us as well.
That's a really great point. When you acquire skills, it doesn't necessarily equate to a 2- and 4-year degree. It can equate to micro badging, credentialing, work-based experience, and apprenticeship. or a combination of all of those things with some college. And so there's lots of different ways for a learner to come in and be hugely productive in your organization. And rethinking those, I think, is not for the faint of heart sometimes, because those rubrics are really ingrained, right? So it's incumbent on all of us to really pressure test that.
That's
right?
spot on.
So I think we were talking when we were preparing too, that as a hiring manager, I have the option of removing some of those impediments and making sure that the pathways to learners is a little bit smoother. And so, for us, we have lots of jobs at Amazon that don't require 2- and 4-year degrees, but many that we have a lot of latitude in how we then promote them externally and internally. So it's a great point. But you talked about measurement and measurement of success, 78% and 53%. I mean, those are great stats. So Ignacy, how do you know you're headed in the right direction with the programs that you're adopting?
I mean, we don't have the magic receipt for this, so we need to try and error. So I mean, we know things work well when we can integrate the students and the new employees into the project, so that's something that we see easily. We also learn from that process, so it's not that in the first time we do it, we succeed, so that's something that we need to adapt and keep learning. I think that's something that in general we need to take into account, so we cannot stay as we are doing things in the past years. We need to continuously change to adapt to the new realities. So how I know, I think when we have a customer which is satisfied with our job, this is the way I see this is working.
That's great. When you're a consulting organization, you have
Exactly.
real feedback from your
Exactly.
clients, that's for sure. Another discussion that we've had sort of off of this stage is Tech Alliances, as you can imagine, with all of these different component parts, can be a little tricky, right? So bringing together education, government, employer community, convener bodies, and often many convener bodies, it's a lot of moving parts. And so, the question is, how do we scale, right? Like, how do we make sure that Tech Alliances can propagate, not just in the European countries, and we just announced in Singapore, in New York, in Illinois, in Washington State, but in other places. So Kirsten, as kind of like the nascent Tech Alliance in April that has now kind of sprung these other Tech Alliances, how do you see scalability in the future to make sure that employers continue to really impact how education sees skilling, and that we continue this process moving forward?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things that attracted us to this partnership in the beginning was that we could see the long-term sustainability of it without additional philanthropic funding. Again, it's built into a system. We have successful proof points, and so the ability is there as far as the model, and that's always our criteria to begin with. I think what I have seen with both us and other organizations where some of the challenges come to play is you have a successful model, but if you aren't, and this sounds kind of incongruent, if you aren't really close and in the weeds to identify what some of these pain points are, and a lot of that is through data, but some of that is also just through real life experience, you can have a successful model that fails. And so, we don't know what we don't know, employers don't know what they don't know, talent doesn't know what they don't know. A great example of this that doesn't directly relate to Tech Alliance, but is recently my husband came home and said, Kirsten, you have to have coffee with Mark, our Bank of America teller. I said, why? He said, well, I see him every week, he's a great kid, and he told me he's applying to Baruch, one of the CUNY schools, and I told him you knew the president. Great, honey, thank you. But so I go out to coffee with Mark, and what do I learn about Mark in 20 minutes? Well, I learned Mark is incredibly personable, so no wonder my husband knows him. He was amazing. He's a 3 years ago graduated from a 4-year CUNY school with a double degree, 3.8 average, finance, and I can't remember the second one was. And Mark also worked during college 40 hours a week at a Starbucks the whole time, and then he got this job. And so I said to Mark, first of all, why do you want to go to grad school? Because I used to work at Bloomberg, and I said, I can tell you at Bloomberg, you could go there tomorrow and make $70,000. The main 3 criteria they're looking for right now is 4-year degree, interest in financial markets, and customer service experience. And now you have Starbucks and you have what you've done at Bank of America. But second of all, I think Bank of America would be really disappointed to know that they're losing this talent. So there are so many disconnects there. And one of them is teaching talent to show up and to say, it's not just employers looking at skills differently. Talent has to look at them too, so they come in and say, I'm going to put that on my resume because getting yelled at Starbucks for 4 years is customer service experience. That's way more demonstrative to me than an internship. So I'm like, that's amazing. And so that's one. Another one is then, if you're Bank of America, how do you get a massive company? How do you make sure that managers are incentivized the whole way up to continue to upskill and promote and their employees into other opportunities? And so and then there's again all the other advisors and families and people that go into influencing these decisions. But I say that because I'm very excited about this proof point because the model is there, but it's also, given that it's early days, it's important to us to make sure we're close enough to this the same way we are with others to identify some of those things that we may not know that need to be fixed.
I agree with all of that. And there is, such an intersection of what we need as employers in the middle of that, working at a cash register, or, all of that hyper functioning that you have to do to talk to a customer, to solve problems, to, really, function publicly and externally, and bringing that to the fore is really important.
And when you think about taking a risk on talent, which we all always are, I think about myself who had internships. And if I put myself next to the CUNY students we work with now, and many of them now work at our organization, I was the bigger risk. If you have someone who has worked for 4 years, they've had a boss, they know how to show up on time, they have time management skills, accountability, so in many cases have already been a manager. And then you have someone who's done a few internships. I'm not knocking internships, they're incredibly valuable experiences, but I'm just saying I think that it really is, when you think about the skills that are, when we talk about, aside from technical skills, just the skills that are needed in the workplace today to be a successful employee and a successful leader, a lot of those are things you can learn in other jobs outside of internships.
I agree. So, as we're kind of winding this down, I want to make sure that we leave everybody here with some actionable steps. And, because you guys have made it work and made it seem so easy, and we're seeing great results. And so I'll start with you, Kirsten, and then I'll go to Ignacy and then Grant. So what kind of actionable steps can this group take to really change, to bridge the skills gap and also change the trajectory of early career talent so that they can enter the workforce, as you had mentioned, Mark?
I think taking advantage of looking at, if you're not an Amazon employee, another employer, looking at if there are degree programs out there designed by industry leaders like Amazon. If it's good enough for Amazon, it should be good enough for you, and that's the talent that you need. That's a no-brainer to me. Again, of the training program, think of it like a training program. They have 2-year degree and the training that you're looking for over another one, which might be a risk. And so I think I know I keep driving home the importance of education and business being aligned the whole way through with the curriculum, but that also is a stamp of approval, I think, to show to employers, and they can use that as signaling as far as if you aren't going to build your own programs and go out and help and build curriculum yourselves, at least you know where you can find really strong skilled talent in your backyard.
Great. And Ignacy, on your side, advice?
Yeah, I would say being here, I would say we need to reinvent ourselves. And that's on the employers, the organizations, and all the education institutions. I think we discussed a lot, so we no longer have to be in separate silos, so we need to work together towards a unique objective. So my actionable recommendation in here would be to let's work together towards that objective that we have in common. So.
Yeah, and I think it's important, one of the things that Grant brought home too is it's important for employers to communicate very clearly what their skills needs are, right?
Yeah.
And to make sure that when you have that, when you're breaking down those silos, that what you need is clearly understood by all of those convening bodies so they can make sure to produce the
exactly. We need to reconnect all this because it was somehow disconnected and needs to be connected again.
Yeah, completely agree. And I'm going to give Grant the last word here.
I love the last word. Well, first of all, I'm a +1 on both of the points that were already made. What I would say is get started. Start somewhere and get started. I think the best day to start was yesterday. The second best day to start is today.
Yeah.
So if your organization isn't on this journey, we've already talked about so many resources that you can use. And start small. We all did. We all started with really humble beginnings. And so I'd recommend that. I think the other thing that I'd talk about that we didn't really cover a lot during this discussion is, it becomes a win-win-win, and the third win is around our business objectives. We all have to continue to grow and thrive as a business to support these programs. And what we've seen in every facet of early career programs is not only do we get new talent in the organization, not only does talent get developed and the opportunity for that individual person, but we're able to get our business objectives done. These people are doing amazing projects. They're delivering value for our customers. They're helping the top line and the bottom line. And so if there wasn't a good enough reason to get started, that's a third reason to get started, because your business is going to thrive. And those proof points also potentially help with any naysayers that might live in the organization that are still kind of attached to that traditional method. You can use those proof points to say, hey, look, we're doing something different, and it's actually working.
That's great. And it's the reason why we do it, right? So your last proof point is exactly the reason why the Tech Alliances exist. We do it because it's the right thing to do for early learners. It's the right thing to do for our communities, but it's also the right thing to do for our employers, all of whom have great demand for cloud-based skills and need this talent to continue to grow their businesses. So on that note, I want to thank so much our panelists who came